Welcome back to Mik'd Up. Listen,
I love some doughs.
Listen,
Come on
I
here.
just two ads in one, two commercials in one break. I'm sorry. We are excited to introduce our next guest. Billy Embody covers everything LSU recruiting for On3 Sports. Billy, I appreciate you joining the show. We've had you on a couple times. You obviously know a whole hell of a lot more than I do in the recruiting world. It seems to me that this 2024 recruiting class is off to a really good start, but I think that there's a lot left out there, and I think that some people may be committed somewhere and can make changes at the end. Do you get that same feeling, and what's the outlook? How do you see this class finishing up in December and January or February?
Yeah, right now sits in a good spot. You've got a class that ranks 6th overall in the country, and that's a really good position to be in when you're looking at how things kind of played out over the course of the summer. LSU took some big swings on some highly touted guys. Somebody like Colin Simmons comes to mind. He ends up going to Texas, but LSU came away with his 4-star running back teammate, Caden Durham, who's one of the best running backs in the country, one of the fastest guys in the country. They also reeled in a 2025 prospect that they impressed while Caden Durham was on campus, DeCorian Moore, his 5-star teammate. So they're building some momentum, and even if you look at before Caden Durham, who got a lot of the buzz lately, they beat Texas A&M on Ori Williams, a really high upside offensive tackle from the state of Texas. They also went into the state of Florida and got Kai Bates, one of the top cornerbacks in the entire country, and a recruitment where a lot of people thought Tennessee was going to get him in the end. Jelani Watkins is one of the fastest players in the country. He's also committed now at wide receiver for the Tigers. But I think one of the best moments of this summer was, and it just kind of shows you what can still happen over the course of these next however many months we've got, Tylen Singleton from Manning High School, a guy that LSU hadn't had on campus since April, an in-state player at a program that LSU had some struggles with getting guys out of. One of the best linebackers in the country. He's versatile. He can play safety, play a little nickel linebacker, maybe grow into a bigger linebacker. But Tylen Singleton ends up committing to LSU before the Bayou Splash even happens. And I think that was big to make that statement in the state of Louisiana. Now, we've seen a Colin Simmons commit elsewhere. We've seen Wardell Mack commit to Florida, a surprise. And he's the state's number 2 overall prospect and plays his high school ball at John Ehret in the New Orleans area. But instead of going to Texas, he goes to Florida as of right now. That's one where LSU is going to keep hammering away, trying to make some noise. And they've got some other targets out there as well. Dominic McKinley, the state's number 1 prospect, hasn't made a decision just yet. He's expected to do that right around the start of his senior season. He's a 5-star for us if the rankings ended today. LSU's battling Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and others there. This class sits at number 6 in the country with a large base of it built on Louisiana. I think Brian Kelly and his staff have done a better job casting a smaller net, and there's still some multiple 5-star prospects that are going to come to campus next month too for official visits.
So you talked about Colin Simmons and you talked about Dominic McKinley. Obviously, Colin Simmons was the number 1 guy on their board. McKinley kind of maybe got put a little bit in the back burner, but the defensive end position is such a premier recruiting spot because those are really hard guys to get, especially those 5-star guys that are coming off the edge. There's not many of them. The Colin Simmons recruitment, obviously, he goes to Texas. I feel like that one's not over. You just mentioned that they're still working on that. This Dominic McKinley, him going to Texas, does that ramp up LSU's recruitment on Dominic McKinley? And why were they kind of not as, I don't say high, but why weren't they pushing early on for him like they were with Colin Simmons?
I think the interesting thing with Dominic McKinley is we saw some high-level program really jump in there towards the end of his junior season. But it's kind of funny. Sometimes you go to camp and you see prospects that, wow, really jump out to you. And a lot of the time they're offensive or defensive linemen just because those guys are so huge. And some of them really have those measurables you can just see with your own 2 eyes pretty easily. Dominic McKinley has a blurry picture from me back in the summer of 2022, and just because he was the biggest guy on the field. LSU had him at camp. They didn't offer him. He was a guy that was still developing overall, and then he goes out and has this incredible junior season, and then programs across country start calling. We name him a guy as a 5-star for on three, have him in that range, in that realm of finishing as a 5-star. And for LSU, they go through a defensive line coach change. They kind of have seen that turnover at the position where you didn't necessarily have the ability to lay some groundwork. And so then you go and you offer him during the January evaluation period. You get him right on campus, him and his family, right before they ended up going to visit Oklahoma. And you felt like, all right, they're going to have a good chance here. And they're in the mix for this recruitment in a big way, especially after his Bayou Splash visit. But sometimes recruiting can be weird where sometimes you see guys that look that good physically and you need to maybe get some extra validation.
Yeah.
And other programs offering like they did, I think, kind of was an example where we saw that with Dominic McKinley, and LSU ends up making the move on him because he was right there last summer. But again, he wasn't a guy that even jumped out enough for us to even really say, wow, we got to go talk to that kid and interview him and things like that. So it has been just a big meteoric rise for him, and he and his family, I think, have done a good job really controlling this recruitment in a way where it could have gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
Things could have gotten crazy, but parents are great. I think they do a really nice job of keeping everything kind of level and trying to go about this the right way because he's a guy that isn't like a Tylen Singleton or a Wardell Mack where they've been on the radar for years. This has all come so fast. So they've gone through their official visits in June. They came back to LSU for the Bayou Splash. And now as they get ready to make a decision before their senior season, they can kind of weigh the pros and cons and see how the chips fall. For LSU, he's that must-get guy in the state. Tylen Singleton, you kind of thought, okay, they've got a good linebacker class. They can get him. He'd be a nice piece. But he also goes to Manny. Wardell Mack, they've signed a great defense. They've got guys committed that are make up a great defensive back class. But you kind of felt like, all right, New Orleans kids should be in a good spot. Dominic McKinley, position of need with the defensive line tackle spot. If Mason Smith, heads out, they're going to lose other guys. If they have good seasons too, this is one of those players where you've got to land. And he's, once again, when you talk about locking down the state of Louisiana, you can land a lot of quality players. But if you don't get the top two in the state, that's rough. We know what happened last year with like Arch Manning and guys like that. There wasn't much interest on their end. This year they've had guys on campus multiple times. Yeah. They've got to get Dominic McKinley. And even if for some reason he goes somewhere else when he does make this decision, LSU does have the official visit in its back pocket for later this fall.
Especially from Acadiana and Lafayette. Like that's an area that is a feeder to LSU, right? Like they have had a lot of success in players from that area. So that's someone that you really just don't want someone coming in there and plucking them out of an area that you have had a lot of success with historically, in with your program. So I agree with you. Jay, you got a question?
Yeah, Billy, there's a method to the madness year in and year out. For the casual fan, if you were sitting there looking at the 2023 season and kind of predicting how it goes for LSU, can you explain the positions of needs that LSU has after this year and why they are attacking the positions that they're attacking and what you kind of see them needing at the end of the year?
Yeah, I think when you look at LSU and the cornerback position, and Brian Kelly addressed Denver Harris's status today, that was a guy that they brought in thinking, okay, you've got multiple years, we'll see how things go with him. Last year they signed Javian Toviano, who's very position versatile. Maybe he doesn't play corner the whole time. Jeremiah Hughes, they signed him as a corner. Ashton Stamps has had a really good camp. They have some guys that are kind of coming up, but you also have to complete that rebuild. And I think what they've done with the secondary is really what the doctors ordered for this team in the long run, because they've been able to land two guys that I feel like could very well finish as top 100 prospects, and Andre Evans from Tennessee, and Kai Bates from the state of Florida, but both at the very least are top 150 prospects. Then you've got some nickels, Jawan Johnson, Wallace Foster. You've got two of the best safeties in the country, both of which have various skill sets with Deshaun McBride and Joel Rogers, who just aren't talked enough about nationally overall. I think the secondary rebuild was really important for this class. And then you get to the defensive line. I think defensive tackle is a huge need. You've got Demarion Johnson committed. You've got Ahmad Bro committed, who could kind of maybe grow into a defensive tackle, but I think he stays at kind of a strong side defensive end, maybe a sawed-off D-tackle. But then you've got a Kalaj Cobbins, who right now is your only guy that you've got in the class as a true edge rusher. He's played linebacker, but I think his overall skill set and just how hard he plays, I would want him coming off the edge. And they kind of talked to him a little bit about playing a Harold Perkins role. But those guys are solid Louisiana prospects. I think you've got to find a way to get a Dominic McKinley or a Colin Simmons. You've got to find a way to get a true instant impact guy along the defensive line, whether it's edge rusher or D tackle. I think Brad Davis has done a great job rebuilding the offensive line, so you don't need to really even add any more guys to that class if you don't need to, especially with the way he's rebuilt it over the years. Tight end, you've got a guy in Trey'Dez Green that is really impressive. Check there. Caden Durham was your lone running back target. One of the best in the country. Frank Wilson gets him across the finish line. Check there. Colin Hurley, four-star quarterback. You've got him on board. And the wide receiver spot is intriguing after signing a great class in 2023. You've got this 2024 class with a bunch of speedy guys, a couple Louisiana guys, and Michael Turner and Kylan Billiot. And then the linebacker group, I think, with Tylen Singleton, Devon Keys, Xavier Atkins is still on committed, kind of, in a somewhat of a weird spot overall, but they have him in the class. So I think what's left now is you've got to get difference-making defensive linemen and edge rushers.
Yeah, a lot of people are blaming you for Colin Simmons not committing to LSU because of you took your vacation whenever you thought that it was going to be they moved the commitment date up. Billy ends up going to Maine, I believe, and so he misses out on the announcement, couldn't push him across the finish line. No big
That's
deal.
some lobster?
Yeah, a lobster roll. But I wanted to ask you, in that same vein, when a lot of what came out after the Colin Simmons announcement was this doesn't mean it's over. He flirted with LSU to the LSU hat. Obviously, LSU has been in the running for a long time now. Do you see this going up until signing day? And if it's not that, does LSU almost punt on him and go exclusively for McKinley? Because that's what I know Mikey touched on a little bit, but it does feel like it was you almost picked one or the other, and now LSU is in a spot where, okay, he committed to Texas. Do you kind of punt on that and go as hard as you can for McKinley just to make sure you get one in the boat?
So I think with and his family, and I think they're going about it a little bit different than maybe Colin and his family did. And I don't think either family's wrong on how they're handling it and how they've kind of gone about it overall. Like I think Colin Simmons got put in a situation where I think the NIL money that he is going to get from wherever he goes is awesome. I'm for that. I think you guys Colin Simmons in NIL. But I think with Colin Simmons, it's not done because of that. And it wouldn't shock me if he pops in on campus for a game. It wouldn't shock me at all. And I think for LSU, they've still got their official visit with him, which they can use. And we'll see if he takes that. But there's going to be kind of that natural cooling off period in a sense of the initial commitment. I think for LSU, you need to turn the heat up on Danny Okoye. He's one of the best edge prospects in the country. He's another tough battle, but he really thought highly of LSU coming off of his June unofficial visit. Turn the heat up there. You are at a place with Colin Simmons where there's no more learning that needs to happen. You just need to keep recruiting and keep, all that to see how it pans out. With Dominic McKinley, I think they're going to need to continue to recruit him all the way through his decision in September, the beginning of September, because I think he has just some different priorities. He's got a brother that's coming up and is going to be on a full ride somewhere. His parents are, both really prioritize education, and that's been a big pitch for a lot of programs that they've had to weigh. They're, people of faith, and there's just a lot of different pieces there. Whereas Colin was, they whittled it down to distance. They whittled it down to a couple schools, and they really had their priorities with their family in just a little bit of a different sense. And you heard about the announcement. Texas, he felt like that was best for his family to take care of him and all of that. And I think he could very well end up at LSU, and maybe that would be the same sentence he would say at the end. But we just don't know. They're very different recruitments, I think. So you've got to evaluate them differently in that regard.
Absolutely.
Differently in that regard.
And a quick one coming up. You knocked, obviously, the big news around Baton Rouge is everything around the Denver Harris circus that it's spun out of control, essentially. But what can you say about him and his recruitment? Because LSU fans haven't seen him play, aside from 5 games at Texas A&M. You don't have a lot of tape on him. I'd imagine that you studied him a good bit when he was in high school. What is the player that LSU was getting aside from the personality?
Yeah, I kind of who came to mind coming up from high school when Denver was starting to come up, and he was that good. I mean, everything you wanted in a player, that was Denver Harris. Lockdown, speed, physicalness, has the frame, has the size, all of those things he had. But to be honest, being here in Texas, I mean, you heard it, in high school. He was suspended a few times. There was this, there was that. And some of it was high school kid stuff. And you kind of got to weed all that out. But this whole, just everything going on with him isn't necessarily new, because it's always been something. Kind of with Denver, even going back to high school at North Shore. I mean, I want to say he basically barely got across the finish line when it came to finishing out his senior season at North Shore. And I know in the playoffs that he was suspended for one of the games. It was kind of a deal. So I hope he gets it all figured out, because he's a heck of a talent. And if he does get it figured out, he's going to be pretty special at LSU.
I hope he does, because we need it. We need that cornerback depth. We hope he does. Billy, man, I appreciate your time. Before I let you go, is there a surprise recruit that could possibly happen that LSU that's not really on people's radar going into this recruiting class, that maybe at the end of it you say, oh man, that's kind of a shock, but I'm not surprised?
If I had to pick one, I would probably pick Terry Bussey, the 5-star athlete out of Houston High School. He's in East Texas. He's set to officially visit LSU next month. He's got a commitment date for right after that official visit. I have heard a ton of Texas A&M buzz that he's a silent commit there, but he wants to take an official visit. But sometimes when that happens, you never know. Things can change, and maybe he isn't feeling it as much, and you could maybe see him go LSU's way. He's got a family full of LSU fans. He's got some family from Louisiana. If there was a surprise in that sense, I could see it being Terry Bussey. I think they have kind of an uphill battle there, but they're going to host him for an official visit. He's wanted to make that happen, so you could shoot your shot and see. He'd be one of the – he would make LSU safeties class, I think, the best in the country. You'd have Deshaun McBride, Joel Rogers, who are 2 4-stars, solid 4-star prospects, guys who could very well be top 100 prospects, and then you'd have a 5-star in Terry Bussey. I would go with the surprise being Terry Bussey over anyone else, unless I'm missing one off the top.
Well, I love that. It's a 5-star. We love 5-star surprises. That'd be great. Billy, man, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time. Hopefully we can have you on again as the recruiting season unfolds. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll talk to you again soon, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah, appreciate you, man.